Way.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Jennifer Tanner. We have a special guest today, especially with everything that has happened with COVID-19 and people moving indoors. Really important to keep moving. But one of the things that is stopping our runners from moving is low back pain. And I see that all the time in the office. Somebody's running, especially when they're getting the distances up, or they start, pushing the distances a little bit quicker, which we're seeing now. People have a little bit more time. They're like, hey, I'm just going to go out and run 20K. They wake up the next day and their back is just a little bit sore. So today we have Scott Tate. He is a personal trainer. He's been training people for 15 years, and he has his home gym, Modus Training Studios. We are lucky to have him on today, and he is going to break down what he sees with backs and runners, and he has a few other secrets that he's going to share with us. So welcome, Scott.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So also much appreciated that Scott is coming today with a newborn. So we definitely appreciate the time that you have peeled yourself away from your family right now. So tell us, Scott, what do you see in the gym?
Well, in the gym, I get a mix of people coming to me, and we tend to see, or at least I see a mix of people who've got things in their way and they can't quite identify what. So they've tried some traditional solutions to things, and the aches and pains or kind of the performance impediments are still there. So oftentimes they come down to really subtle components of kind of core and spine health that just get overlooked. And then typically kind of whether it's training volume in the gym or training volume on the runs, find that volume is what tends to bring people in. Say, hey, I've been fine. And then all of a sudden things have been bugging me and they just won't go away. And that's where we come in with kind of movement fixes to things in surprising ways usually.
Okay, so if you see somebody that's like has that drastic increase in volume, do you have a guideline that you kind of recommend to people?
Yeah, the first thing is to do a real good health history, like any other professional, really look at the whole picture. So kind of one story that way is a woman who was running long distances and then started running marathons. And then all of a sudden her back started to bug her after multiple marathons. So she'd been doing it for a while. And then her back started to get really bad and painful. And then it was interfering with both her runs and her work and her life. So looking at her story, for example, she bought a meat and cheese company. Awesome products, great. I can give you those referrals later. But buying the business, she was also doing a lot of the physically demanding jobs, hauling things, lifting things, a lot of moving, a lot of just extra work, heavy containers, big awkward lifts. And it turns out it was that plus a longer commute that was just sucking her capacity. So her running performance probably wouldn't have changed at all had she not had other lifestyle things happen. So just appreciating the longer commute plus the extra work, that limited her capacity. So basically the system I use when looking at people is what's your capacity to do the thing you love doing? What might be getting in the way of that capacity? And then how do we build that capacity back up and then beyond? So it kind of really starts with the big overall picture of the person with the lens on capacity, what's going to stop that.
Yeah, great analogy, because we all love to be active, we all love to move, but it's not the only thing that we're doing in our lives, right? We have work, we have family, we have other obligations that could be zapping us of some of the energy that we want to be putting on the streets as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and right now is an interesting time too. We have a lot of people, and my client is still working with her 10 years later, but and other clients who are now way more sedentary than they were because of COVID. So way more sedentary and then itching to get out. Like you said, when they feel confident enough to get out, not as worried about the distancing stuff, and they want to go for a long run, then their back will hurt because they've been sitting for way too long. Yeah. So that's where kind of the building a really good warm-up becomes critical. That's kind of the next part of the puzzle is what's your capacity and how do we build a good warm-up to get you ready, your mind and body ready for whatever volume of run you've got. And that comes back to what is core training and what is core strength often.
Okay, so let's break that apart a little bit. So just say like this lady, for example, you've identified that, there's other things that are maximizing her capacity. We've kind of developed a protocol that's going to allow for a bit more balance between the things she loves and the things she's obligated to be doing. And now we need to develop some sort of like warm up or some sort of core stability. What might that look like?
So the first thing is often just repositioning what core strength means for people. A lot of individuals think it's just the anterior chain, right? Just the abdominals, the six pack, the things you can see.
Yeah.
So the first thing is educating people with the 360-degree kind of head to bottom of the tailbone kind of approach to core strength.
Okay.
And then sometimes even further. So other people come in with foot and ankle issues that seem to be kind of just foot and ankle related, but often they're about core strength too. So really understanding this is the fundamental piece. If this isn't functioning well, nothing else will really function optimally. So just making every exercise we do about your core strength and stiffness, whether it's a heel raise or whether it's a deadlift, kind of making that fundamental. So we talk about kind of what neutral spine looks and feels like, and then how to brace appropriately, how to create enough stiffness for the exercise. Yeah, translating that stiffness into enough kind of relaxation when you're running to just kind of get into a flow and run. Because you can't be bracing like you're doing a deadlift when you're out for a run.
Okay.
Learning how to turn it on and turn it off.
All right, guys, so if you were out there and you were running like a robot, that is a good sign. You need to be doing some more core workout there. You don't need to be crushing the run, literally crushing it.
That's it. That's it. So yeah, it comes to like neutral spine, and then how do we develop that? And then what do you need to get your brain into that position? And that's what a good warm-up is. So some people need to be doing more of the side planking or kind of lateral chain stuff. Others need to be really developing the posterior part of that with things like hinges and then deadlift motions. Or sometimes it's the whole 360, so exercises like bird dogs and some of those critical kind of core brain body exercises to get your brain into your body before you do your thing. So it's not about pre-fatiguing that. Again, thinking about capacity, it's about getting your brain into that position so you can go run and maintain your position instead of slowly yanking on it.
Yes.
And causing issues the other way.
Yeah, and if anybody has watched the other summits, our injury-based summit, Dr. Emily Stoichel, she talks about that, pre-engaging your neurological system before you run can, one, prevent injuries, but also help your body engage the areas that it needs to do to help heal certain areas. So I love that we are reiterating the same thing again, just componing it to a different part of the body that we're talking a bit more about that core structure. Do you see people coming in with is there like a typical posture that you see, like shoulders rounded or kind of that like arch? Is there something that you see time and time again?
For sure. And I would say for most individuals with low back pain, runners or not, typically a little more forward head carriage, a little more sway back, or kind of excessive lordosis, like that lower body posture. Kind of upper lower cross, depending on where you studied and what language you're used to. But yeah, generally the forward head carriage and education is helpful, right? If that weighs 20, 30 pounds, every inch it's sitting forward, it's just yanking on all those muscles in the back. And then if you're running and you're not staying vertical, every time it yanks forward when you're running, it's just pulling on that system. So I think breaking things down so people understand the biological stress of a heavy head yanking forward, it's helpful when they understand. So I like teaching as much as possible. But yeah, that's the common kind of forward carried posture. And then often then overutilizing kind of pecs in the front of your body rather than the backswing and using your lats and being biomechanically efficient with running versus inefficient from a postural sense.
Yeah, I see that rounded shoulders quite often, and I think a lot just because of our jobs, right? We're like hunched over a computer like this and kind of slouchy and whatnot, so that naturally.
Yeah. And that's where strength training, or looking at strength training differently. If you look at strength training as a way to build your capacity, so you kind of start with what's getting in the way of your capacity. And part of that, just like you're sitting your posture up now as we chat, is like, this is not helping you. This would be more helpful. So your strength training becomes getting into positions that look like this, and then seeing how long you can maintain them for, whether it's a bench press or a squat or a deadlift or a bicep curl. Everything becomes a valuable exercise because it's practicing this. So you don't have to think about it when you run. You can just run. Your body knows where to be if you've practiced it with good strength training.
So when you say how long you can maintain it for, do you mean just say you're doing a bench press? How many presses can you do until your posture becomes compromised? Is that what you're saying? Or press and hold?
every exercise is about that postural compromise. So whether it's a bench press, usually what goes is someone's head and neck starts to get into it
Okay.
when they get tired. If it's a deadlift, same kind of thing, usually the head and neck. There's some kind of form breakdown, but that form breakdown ideally should be coming from the central pillar, because we're just trying to challenge this all the time. But for new and novice athletes, this is what you really got to be aware of. That's the purpose of your training for the first 10 years of your training, really.
So would you say, just say you're doing, again, that bench press, you reach 12 and you're like, oh, like you start noticing things are shifting, that's your max for that set?
Yeah, and particularly if you're developing your strength to translate it to running or a sport. Okay. Yeah, if you're just trying to bench press for the sake of bench pressing, you might want to grind out a couple just to get the reps in. I would suggest that's not a good idea, even if you're a competitive bench presser. But yeah, if you think of all those basic traditional strength training movements relative to your sport, it's all about this central pillar. Can I keep this engaged and get tired elsewhere, but keep this nice and solid? That translates to you not hurting your back later.
Okay. Yeah, that's amazing. I see. Now you mentioned briefly, you kind of have that quadrant of where we should be focusing head to tailbone, but then you said, sometimes ankles and knees come into play as well.
Yeah. So I think one way to look at Thomas Myers, if your kind of group has been exposed to Thomas Myers or that kind of way of looking at the body in fascial chains and connected chains, I think it's a really good way to start. So I have a flip chart of cards that I show people of kind of the inner unit and the deep wall of musculature that becomes your whole core. So really it's the top of your head to your bottom of your feet. Yeah. There's a deep string of tissues that all work together to keep you vertical, basically. So usually feet and ankles with the repetition, especially if you're on concrete and stuff, they get a little sore and irritated. And if they're in pain, you'll start to do funny things because you're getting kind of funny sensations from the bottom. It'll yank the top. Okay. Or adductors and groin stuff. So a little lower down the core, it doesn't seem like core, but your adductors are an extension of that core. So if they get strained, everything starts to get a little dysfunctional. So what'll happen are compensations will happen. So if your foot gets a little gnarly and a tissue in there, that's where massage and physical therapists can be helpful. But you can do a lot with self-massage if you identify, hey, when this doesn't work, my breathing goes funny. So I'll do a little self-massage, and part of my warm-up, like Dr. Emily might have mentioned, part of your warm-up might be massaging some tissues that typically get taut, and then immediately afterwards doing some breathing or doing some bracing. So your brain gets a signal, is okay, this is relaxed. It usually gets tense or sensitive. I'm going to chill it out now and then do my core exercises. So my brain recognizes this pattern of relax and stable where it needs to be instead of starting to limp earlier.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds awesome. Yeah. One of the tests that I'll do in clinic, if somebody comes in, they're like, oh, my back is killing me, I'll do a calf tension test. And so basically, I don't know if you do this one, and it's a little awkward if you can do it right now, but basically you line your feet up, front to back, your toe to your heel, and then you bend forward, or try to do like a squat without lifting your heels up. You're familiar with that one? Yeah. Yeah, and so you want the knee that's in behind, you want it to be able to reach your medial malleolus, that little bony part on the inside of your knee. I find a lot of times those runners, they can't do that stretch. And so those tight calves, when you think of like that chain, everything's connected, right? You've got your calves, they link up to your knees, to your hips, and that's pulling on the way your hips are balancing as well. So quite often, if we're doing acupuncture or something with those knees and those calves, and you just feel them like loosening right up. Yeah, exactly. By the end of the visit, they're like, yeah. And
this is where it's interesting to think about different ways we can quiet those tissues down, and then what do you replace that sensitivity with? Because I'll look at the system like the calf, for example, and clients who come in, the same lady, we got her back out of the way, and then her calf started to get in the way as she brought her volume back up. So we did some specific calf work and self-massage to kind of chill out the tissue, and then immediately give her the signal of good core strength and challenging that tissue, like so a deadlift or a stiff leg deadlift, to train the rest of her posterior chain, if you think of the calves in that chain, to feel strong. So relax things down, and then immediately followed up with some kind of activation drill. Yeah, like isolate and then integrate. The way I'll kind of take the therapeutic intervention and then put it back into something that reintegrates it with that whole posterior chain in the sense of the calves. Like that's a really valuable specific warm-up for someone.
Yeah, love it. Now, looking at like one of the approaches that I like that you have mentioned in the past is that whole body approach. So tell me a little bit about that. Like sometimes there's trainers that are more specific and they'll just focus on one, you know, I want, I don't know, big biceps. But you have a little bit of a different approach. Tell me what you've seen with this whole body approach.
Sure. So I find invariably if someone's got, even if it's a very specific goal like running performance, or even if it's bicep growth, it's just bicep growth, you can't just do one motion repetitively and expect your whole body to respond, or at least respond favorably. So for example, if you're just running, you'll pound yourself into the pavement before you really get much stronger to a certain point. So looking at running is a nice exercise, or other sports where you're using your whole body, it's a bit more obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think it's just your leg strength you got to develop to get better at running, well, you're missing the fact that your arms are swinging on top of your core. So I tend to look at whole body training as a way to get really balanced in a bigger picture, but really efficient specifically. So for the bicep curler, we talk about the value of actually getting really good core strength so you can in fact just use your bicep instead of using your whole body. You're no longer developing your bicep. Or for a runner, instead of just developing your leg strength, you're developing your whole. So I think by looking at the whole body instead of specific isolation, we get more efficiency and better balance long term so that you can keep doing your thing rather than doing it and then burning out or injuring yourself. So it's usually more of an education approach of the value of using the whole body and putting everything into even a simple task.
Mm-hmm.
It's more engaging mentally, and it's more valuable on the body sense as well.
And what about gut health? What's your take on that?
So gut health is interesting from runners. So another runner client I had who wanted to get into running, so they came in to get strong so they could then run. They knew being stronger would help their running, so that was great. And then we started training, and this gentleman, kind of mid-40s, professional, busy, so food was inconsistent at best, but really started to notice some days getting pain really early in even simple upper body exercises through his back, let alone getting on the treadmill or running. So what we found is that he was eating a lot more gluten and kind of basically bread products for kind of quick takeouts. And on those days where he did, his digestive system would get upset. And he'd have some bloating and some pain, and then it would make it almost impossible for him to really brace his spine well enough to even do a shoulder press, let alone haul 220 pounds for a run.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of the relationship back to low back pain, interestingly, this story, but overall performance, I think is really interesting relative to food, in particular to bloating when there's obvious distension and bloating. It's something that limits your ability to contract your muscles. If you think of getting bloated and really distended right now and push your belly out, and then try and brace, it's uncomfortable, right? If you organize yourself and then brace, it's far more comfortable. So if you've got physical discomfort in that digestive system, it's hard to create stiffness. Let alone if you're not digesting things, it's hard to recover from whatever your training is.
Yeah.
So,
and I like to think of it from an inflammatory perspective too, right? If you're like bloated, you're uncomfortable, you're not feeling so hot, there's some inflammation that's happening within the lining of the intestinal tract. Your bloodstream and your intestinal tract are kind of side by side. So now that inflammation can transfer over to your bloodstream and become systemic. So things like muscle soreness and engagement can be a little bit more difficult than if you didn't have that inflammation to be dealing with. And also from like a nutrient absorption standpoint, like there isn't as adequate absorption mechanisms in place. So leaving you feeling a little bit depleted. So you don't have those resources to, for that person in particular, to get started off on the right foot.
Yeah, to use, let alone improve your performance, but just to get through the day and be able to do things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's critical. And I find my way in, people typically come in with movement issues. So we'll come in with movement and we'll get them to feel their body and how when they're using their whole body. Yeah, it's meditative when you're using your whole body and engage with something. And then once you start using your whole body, then you can notice parts of your body that are getting in the way, like your digestive system or like your energy level not being there. And you start to notice inconsistencies in your energy level. And then we'll go back in and talk about nutrition and sleep, and we'll make referrals accordingly. As everything functions as one big piece, like you said. Even if you're just doing bicep curls, you still need to get good sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. So Scott has generously put together a masterclass, a runner's edition for us. So at the end, you guys can link in and have access to it. But Scott, tell us a little bit about this masterclass.
Sure. I put it together to try and answer a lot of the questions I get oftentimes in kind of discovery calls or in those first few sessions with people to just get people ahead of the curve a little bit. So what we're going to go over are some more philosophy things we chatted about today, like looking at every exercise as kind of a core exercise. We'll dig a little deeper into breathing mechanics and performance, and also running, obviously, other tasks. So we'll start to talk about breathing and how to integrate breathing into the mix, and then just go through some really specific keys to make every exercise better. There's kind of 4+2 keys that I go through to make every exercise. This is what I teach my students at Guelph Humber or my clients or other trainers I work with. It's those same essentials to make everything a bit better. And then we'll do some specific exercises and go through really unique ways to develop a warm-up for you and integrate some of the things we talked about, like how do I go through this tight calf issue and make a good warm-up and a good strength training. So we'll cover some common questions. And then we'll sneak in some little tricks and tips about progressive muscle relaxation and other ways to look at strength training and how it'll help you overall.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about that 4+2 key that you just
Sure, yeah. So generally, again, I have people with aches and pains and have not had success elsewhere. It's typically when people come into my practice. So more often than not, injuries are low back, knee, shoulder, and ankles. Most common injury spots. So we look at kind of 4 keys to set up every exercise and involving those. So the first key is that neutral spine and finding what your neutral spine is. That's pain-free and stable that you can brace against. And that's one of the +2 ones, is that bracing piece. The second part, if you think of shoulders, is where to orient your shoulder. So that scapulothoracic rhythm, where do I put my shoulder so this ball and socket can move? So that's kind of the 2 key, is that ball and socket centering. The third one is knee tracking. Knees being so commonly injured, look at knee tracking. So how do I groove the pattern of that knee for a squat, for a deadlift? Where do I put my feet? Where do I orient so I'm protecting my knees? And then 3, foot and ankle stability. In general, we'll term that as balance. So every exercise has got some kind of base of support. Find your center of gravity on top of that base of support. So whether it's foot and ankle and single leg exercises or it's a big bilateral exercise, really understanding those key fundamental kinesiology principles of movement. So those are the big 4: neutral spine, shoulder stability and positioning, knee tracking, and center gravity over balance. And then the +2 are breathing and bracing. So every exercise has got some breathing rhythm and then some bracing requirement to do it and not hurt yourself. So how do you add those things into each movement to get the most out of them?
Yeah, do you have a specific breathing protocol that you walk your people through?
Yeah, playing with it. So one is learning how to breathe. And then, so unless there's sinus issues specifically, being able to inhale through your nose and exhale through your mouth, being able to punch air through your mouth and integrate that with your core. So being able to exhale hard and feel stiffness in your core are kind of the first 2 pieces. So being able to inhale to create some stiffness and exhale to create some stiffness.
Okay.
So those are the big ones, and we go from there.
So with that inhale, exhale, kind of punch it out, is that something that you have people practice away from their exercise movements and then incorporate it into the movement, or do they do it just when they're doing the specific exercise?
It all depends on the level of pain or discomfort anyone's in. So oftentimes when people are in significant discomfort, they've got a movement disorder in particular, work with some people in that population as well. We'll do breathing as an isolated skill to develop. Can you breathe with your diaphragm and your abdomen and relax your thoracic spine? So being able to breathe just with this region is how often we'll start. And then we'll integrate that into exercise. So it all depends on someone's ability to breathe kind of basically, and then we'll stack on more complicated breathing patterns and breath holding and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I quite often will have, I'll implement some sort of breathing pattern into their, like before, like when they're running or not when they're running, and then bring it into when they're actually running to practice as well. Because I imagine you see a lot of people holding their breath, probably a lot of people like chest breathing, especially if they're like stressed out or they're just getting into things and they haven't kind of built up some of that stability. But I love how you're focusing more on your tummy, diaphragm, that core, getting that breathing in. And so when you do that punch out breathing, people should be feeling what?
So if you physically give yourself a poke, so you can get it on the sip in or the sniff in and the exhale. But if you give yourself a poke, when I sniff in, I should be able to create stiff. And then same thing on the exhale. So you should be able to feel, so those muscles get pokey and feel those muscles get stiff. And that translates to you being able to breathe and maintain stiffness while you're running, so that your natural breathing mechanism will maintain some stiffness instead of getting soft in between strides.
Okay. Yeah. And so do you have somebody, like, do you have them do it 10 times? Do you?
Yeah, so everything's kind of as individualized as I can possibly get it, but we'll start with, hey, what can you do? Can you, like we're talking about, can you separate your diaphragm from your thoracic spine first, like when you're breathing? Can you do that? Apical versus diaphragmatic breathing. So that's one, is can you do that? And if we can do that and you're not in back pain, we'll just say, hey, can you give me 10 nice slow exhales?
Yeah.
Feeling that brace. And some people get to 3 and then they just can't keep their brain in that kind of part of their body. So we work our way up and then we put it into movements as quickly as we can, like a bird dog and pausing and holding, or, I love a good poke in the abdominal region there. So if you remember nothing else from this talk, how do I make my training better? Just think that Scotty's going to come jab you, or get a loving partner in COVID times where a kid to just give you a little poke and make sure you got some stiffness and you're good to go.
Everybody's totally going to remember that now.
Oh, I hope so. I got one thing. I was like, what's my one nugget going to be? The jab.
And that is the secret sauce, everybody.
It totally is. Movement is written in feel, they say. It's a different kind of feel.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we got those core breathing techniques down. What if you had one exercise that you could walk us through that you feel every runner needs to be doing? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and I was thinking about it beforehand. I'm a big fan of Dr. Stuart McGill, if you know his work on spine biomechanics, and he's got kind of a big 3. So it's always hard to boil down to one, and that's for just overall spine biomechanics. And anyone that's got lower back pain, that's the general kind of math that I use to navigate things. So Dr. McGill's got great work. Order of Canada, he's done incredibly well for himself and the world. But I digress. So one thing, I'm gonna go with the hinge.
Okay.
Just the hip hinge.
Okay.
Because we're standing, runners are standing, we're up. So this integrates that kind of neutral spine piece, the shoulder stability piece, the knee tracking a bit, and the balance component. And then we got some breathing and bracing. So it kind of gets it all in there nicely.
So the 4+2 is incorporated into this hip hinge.
Is it weird? Yeah, for sure. You can try along with me if you want to. I might lose the earphones. We'll try.
Okay.
So first mission, you might lose me a little bit here.
Yeah.
Is your lats. So we want the lats to talk a little bit. We can do this seated. You can kind of do a half version seated, or you can do the full standing version. So we kind of screw our lats in. And what's easy to do on this is to over-exaggerate and go to some superhero pose. You're trying to screw your lats in, but keep a nice shape in your spine. So if you had a broomstick on your back, the best way to do this is with a broomstick. Okay. So you're going to stick a broomstick on your back, so it's touching your head, your shoulder blades, and right between your cheeks there. Okay. So I screw my lats in, and I grab that imaginary stick, so it's back there. If that's a helpful visual. Give me a little sip. Sip in through your nose, get a little stiffness. Real exhale, and just make sure this is on. So give yourself a little jab, right? So another way to look at it, if I got a can, as I inhale, sometimes the can opens up. I'm going to exhale and make sure the can is closed. All right, so I got my pelvis and my thoracic spine, I'm locked in here. So I got my lats, and now I'm just going to stick my butt back as far as I can. A little bit of knee bend is fine. You're trying to just move your hips until you get a bit of stretch in the hamstrings. Once you get that stretch, squeeze your butt cheeks together, push the floor apart a little bit, and come on back up. And I should be the exact same place.
Okay, back into that neutral spine again, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm in that spine the whole time. So I got a stick. If you got a loving partner, they can keep the stick on your back for you. So you're just basically hinging or folding at your hips. Your hips go back. You'll naturally bend your knees a little bit. That's fine. Get a little stretch in the hamstrings. Yeah. The spine's in the same position. And then I squeeze my butt cheeks together and drive forward and make sure you haven't hyperextended, you haven't lost that connection.
A little bit sore after yesterday's workout, but
good, yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good way to be.
But did everybody see how slowly and controlled Scott just did that? We see in the gym all the time, people go in and they're like, yeah, I just did 10 hip hinges, I just did 10, whatever, right? Like, yeah, you plowed through an entire workout in like 13 minutes, but that's not always the goal, right? Like you before you even started moving, you did that breathing technique. You engaged that core, you gave yourself a little jab to make sure it was actually on and ready to go. And then you feel the movement. So right there, we just did 2 and I was able to feel it. Like I'm already a little bit sore and, so like, oh yeah, that's engaged. I can tell. Yeah. So would you say that's something like a common thing you see in gyms, with people just plowing through stuff and not really taking the time to put the detail into it?
I'd say tempo and control are critical to develop that mind-body connection, that feel, both with your body and with the floor. Like you said, I also said, spread the feet apart, push into the floor. You've got to engage with what you've got. And as a runner, all you've got is the floor for little fleeting amounts of time, really fleeting amounts of time. So you've got to get all this information on how to keep yourself oriented from those little seconds on the ground. Mm-hmm. So the gym is your time to really make sure you've got great control. So going slowly, you get lots of feedback. You get lots of time to get that information in there, lots of time to practice and store it. Because then when you're running, you're asking your brain to keep that same information in split seconds with every footfall.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing, right? That's the contact point is actually very, very short. And
that's it. The rest is up to you. Like feeling this position, feeling the rotation, the swing, whatever parts you're working on your stroke, whether it's kind of your landing mechanics or your feel. You might be thinking about certain things in your run, or you might be just kind of free running at a certain point. But regardless, the only real spot you've got is information from your body. This is why posture is so key and your strength is key. You get better mind-body connection when you train. And then you have these little moments from the floor. That's a lot to ask. It's a hard sport.
Certainly can be sometimes.
Right? Yeah. If you want to get good at it and feel good and really be able to float and groove with it, like you're asking a lot. It's a pretty awesome human movement, but it's not easy.
Yeah. So one of the things that I find beneficial is, I'll go to the gym. I feel like with my education and my history, I feel like I've got it down, right? I'm like, yeah, okay, I know what to do. I know these exercises. I'm associated with some pretty awesome colleagues and people like yourself giving great tips. But when I do it on my own and when I do it with somebody watching me, with a personal trainer, night and day. So I feel like you need that extra set of eyes to be like, you're cheating. You're not engaged. You're rushing. You're not breathing. You're like all those little things that, we think we're paying attention to, and it just kind of slips our mind. Like it really is valuable to have that second set of eyes and that person to just, one, keep you accountable that you're actually going to do the movement, and 2, to make sure you're doing the movement correctly. So you're rehabbing yourself and preventing those preventing injuries, because we want to keep you guys moving. Especially now, running is great for mental health. It's such a beautiful thing. We want to keep you out there and doing it. So Scott, you're doing virtual training sessions, is that correct?
Yeah. It's actually been it's been trippy to be in like a bunch of living rooms and gyms all day long. I'm used to being in one gym, but I'll pause. The virtual training's been a treat. In part, like I love my clients, and I the personal connection I develop, and kind of the relationship is something I really value. So it's been a treat to be able to keep that going. But it's also been a trip to see how much you can still see and engage and kind of contribute in this environment. It's been a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. And you can do these workouts in your pajamas.
Totally. Yeah, I get a wide variety of clothing choices now. It's way more lax and comfortable, like not matching Lulus all the time for sure.
Yeah. And you have some entertaining people that you're working with, do you not, with their workout?
Oh, I have some great friends at Modus. We've got a couple little kind of mini brands. My teammate Ryan's got Tough Love Training, so a little bit of a hard ass, but also a fun guy. So he's got pantsless workouts because everyone's working out at home anyway. So he's been rocking that. My client Jacob, he's doing stuff with his family. His little 7-year-old is loving the training. So they do kind of family higher intensity body weight training classes. We're having a good time as best we can and keeping everyone moving, and ourselves. And a lot of time we do this as much for ourselves because we know we're better when we move often. So why not share that? So that's been the advantage of this COVID time, is kind of we're forced to share more about what we're doing and how we're engaging with our bodies, and it's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. People are definitely being really creative, and it's a lot of fun to watch what people are coming up with out there. So just to recap on a couple of things that you touched on, like number one, we need to figure out what that capacity is. Where else is your bucket like draining, and where can we plug up those holes so we can maximize the capacity and reroute it into the areas that you really want to be focusing on. And before you start any type of movement, create that neutral spine, and Mark goes through those four touch points. You've got your spine, your shoulders. What was it again?
I'm trying to get my knee up in the screen here. Knee tracking.
Yeah, knee tracking.
Your balance.
And balance. Okay, so there's 4+2 techniques. So we really want to activate that breathe. We want to activate so those huge muscle groups don't take over, and those little muscle groups, they can do their job and keep you well balanced. Scott is offering the Runner's Edition, the masterclass on how to build smarter training programs from the ground up. It sounds amazing. We'll have a link to that if you guys want to jump on board here and get moving with that one in like a safe, engaged manner. And then if you want to work with Scott one-on-one, how can people do that?
If you want to work with me one-on-one, you can find me at modustrainingstudio.com. We use Jane for our online bookings, so you'll see attachments in there. Or you can go to scotttate.com. We're kind of creating our own little sub pockets so we can talk to our people a little differently. So you can find me there, and I think I put that link in the Virtual Summit show notes. Get me through there, and I tend to start with a 20-30 minute call just to understand better what you're looking for, and then make a referral if need be, or get the ball rolling. But yeah, that's right now it's in your living room, weirdly as it is.
Amazing. I love that it's in our living room. And so the two takeaways is that breathing, that kind of punch breathing. Yep, actually, the breathe in and breathe out, and that hip hinge. So, again, there's personalized things that need to be done, but those are absolutely two things that can help engage runners and maximize their performance there. And like Scott says, the secret sauce really is in that breathing and the way your muscles are responding. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, it was one thing that came up as you were talking about it, and just an interesting one for people to consider, the idea of having a trainer or coach and what that does.
Yeah.
The University of Guelph did a really cool study years ago, and I'll drag it up for you if I can, but the basic gist of it was trained athletes, intermediate kind of level, and novice athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And each of them held back a percentage of their maximum abilities when they weren't coached. It was like 30% for the novice, around 20% for the intermediate, 30% for the novice, 20%, and even 10% for the elite or highly trained individual. So we all hold back when there's not someone else there to kind of give us those notes and that positive feedback. So it's pretty awesome what having a coach will do, but giving yourself a good jab is a close second at least.
All right, everybody, we are going home and we're going to be jabbing our abdomen to make sure that it is engaged. And if you want Scott to actually give you that jab, then you can find him at Modus Training. So thanks again for taking that time off from the new family there. We much appreciate it. We really appreciate these tips as well.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being on. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, thanks for having you.